Good evening, everybody. I'm about a minute late. I'm gonna give this about a minute in case anybody wanted to join on. Um, while I'm doing that, tonight I'm having this lovely bourbon. So I hope everybody pours himself a nice drink. So I guess I'll go ahead and start it off. Maybe the maybe a Facebook Live wasn't the best way to do this. Maybe like a Zoom meeting would be better sometime. Um, I'm open to suggestions. I'm still kind of figuring this out as I go. Um, Especially since, whenever I started this group, it it was more of a here's something you can follow while I'm doing my races, and you can just see what I'm doing. But it really turned into something a lot more encouraging with a lot more interaction and a lot more people than I planned. Um, I didn't think there would be so many people interested in seeing me do what I do for fun, um, even though it's not it's not someone's a normal person's idea of fun. So yeah, it really turned into something very encouraging, and I really appreciate everybody's input and encouragement and feedback and all that good stuff. So yeah, maybe a maybe a Zoom meeting will be better next time, because there will be a next time. I've already signed up for this race next year, and there's going to be a couple more this year, I'm sure, that I'm going to sign up for. So I'd like to not just get comments. I'd like to, see everybody face to face and actually talk about it. I think there's a lot more value in that. So I think I just talked myself into making a Zoom meeting next time. But about this race, the first thing I want to do is thank my road crew and the people that helped. Um, Kristen Miller, Shuri Whitehead, and Brad Whitehead. I wouldn't have been able to do this race without you guys. Um, Kristen did, I think she did a lion's share of the driving, and Shuri is just a planning logistics wizard. Um, I really wouldn't have been able to do everything without Shuri. She really held everything together, and thank you, Brad, for letting me have Shuri for a while. Also, Brian Kresmary, he conveniently lives over in St. Augustine, so he was able to jump in for a few hours to give um, Kristen and Shuri some time off that they needed to kind of relax a little bit and take naps probably. It takes a lot to be a road crew for something like this. Um, One of the things about doing races that are this long is that it's not something a person can just do on their own anymore. It's not like a 5K where you can just go to the town square or go to the trailhead and run a 5K, um, or even a marathon. Like most companies that set up races, they'll have aid stations set up and help for everybody that's running a marathon. Something like this that's spread out between two cities 100 miles away with several cities in between, it would just be not logistically impossible, but it would be very impractical for someone or a company to put together a race that's that organized for that long. So the element of road crews is introduced into these endurance races. and it's really asking a lot whenever you ask someone to be a road crew. Um, Kristen and Brad and Cherie and Brian really put themselves out there and sacrificed a lot of their time and effort to help me through that. And I wouldn't have been able to do it on my own. That train's not too loud. So I really owe them a big debt of gratitude for helping me along. Um, and another special thanks is my friend Josh. He um, he made a 6 hour round trip just to bring me a Wawa pretzel, and I needed a pretzel at that point. Um, so yeah, that's Josh. He'll do anything for anybody. So thank you for all of those people that helped me out, and I'll see if I can get get a different round of people to come help me next time, so you guys can have a break. Um, so I've been over a lot of the race in the race report and in the videos that I posted during the race. So I don't want to, rehash the same thing over and over. So I'd like to focus on some things that I learned and some key highlights and takeaways from the race. Overall, this was a phenomenal experience. It's something it's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. And when I first heard about someone running 100 miles in a race, I couldn't wrap my head around it. At the time, it was my first 50K, so 31 mile ultra marathon on a trail. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. But the more and more I got into ultra running, the more and more I wanted to do this 100 mile run and get to this century mark. And it didn't disappoint at all. It was very much a physical and emotional journey. It was a roller coaster. I started really high. Um, Everything was just so perfect at the beginning. Um, Through the first 50 miles, and that's a long time. The first 50 miles just clicked right by. The the miles and the hours. I think it was probably mile 20 that I felt like I hadn't even, been running for more than 20 minutes. And I was hitting all my marks. Um, my nutrition and hydration were just on point. I felt really good. Um, Everything was great. And I think it was a combination of the timing, the duration that I was in the race, and how that coincided with the daylight is when things started to take a turn for me. Um, there was one stop right before sundown where I should have gotten into my night gear, my vest and my warmer clothes and my lights, but I didn't. Just being absent-minded, it wasn't a decision that I made. I just didn't think about it at the time. Um, So between that point to the next stop was about an hour. So in that 1 hour, it started to get really chilly. It started to get really dark. Luckily, Dee Dee, I owe Dee Dee a big thanks too. Dee Dee Kumar was the friend that came along and ran with me for quite a while. About halfway through, she was already in Daytona because of Ocala Triathletes. We were representing a big crew out at the Challenge Daytona Triathlon. So anyway, she came over and ran with me for a while, and she was a good emotional help. She's the sweetest, most upbeat, energetic, encouraging person, and she came along right at the perfect time. Even though, I wish I would have been in a better spot, so it might have been more enjoyable for her, but um, I won. I won in that little span of time because she helped me in some pretty tough spots. So thank you, Dee Dee. Anyway, at that point, when it started to get dark and cold, luckily Dee Dee was there. She had a vest with some lights, so I wasn't in any trouble because we were supposed to have vests and lights at that point. And that's when morale started to take a dive because it was about an hour between those 2 points that I was running. Running, jogging, actually got to a little bit of power walking because of the bathroom issues I was having. Yeah, so between the night, like the daylight, the cold, and just how long I'd been going at that point, they all kind of collaborated to, start to bring down my spirit. But we made it to the next stop. By that time, I started power walking and got into a good rhythm, and then we made it to the aid station. So then I was able to get all my warm clothes and cut that chill that was down to the bone and get some food, that kind of stuff. So things got a little better, like with the new walking plan and everything. So I was on a high, and then I came down. Um, it came down a little more after that. Between that stop and the next one, it got even colder, and I was already my momentum was going down already. My mental momentum, and by the next stop, I was pretty discouraged. Um, like I said, I was kind of in a funk at the time. Um, at the end of the point where Dee Dee was with me. So at that stop, I decided I really need a physical and a mental reboot. I needed a hard reset. So when I got there, that checkpoint was a little villa that Cherie got through some connections. So I was able to go inside and warm up. There was a big comfy chair. Probably saw the picture. And I told him, don't let me sleep more than 10 minutes. So I got my little nap. I got a little bit of warm broth. I got warmed up. I stole some of Kristen's Chick-fil-A waffle fries, and I had my first round of Coke and saltines. So from the outside in, inside out, I was good to go. Felt good. I had that high at the beginning. I came down, and this was the little dip. Things were going pretty good after that. But that was getting into the night. That was just the first couple hours of the night. And this time of year, the night's a lot longer than the day. So that little burst lasted for a little bit and felt pretty good. But as the night went along, it got colder and darker, and also the course went into some really empty highway. It was long stretches of highway where it was just the beach on one side, which was really nice, because it had the moon shining on the waves and everything. So that was really pretty. Luckily, that was there, because on the other side of the road there was nothing. It was just dunes and grass, and every once in a while there might have been a break and some buildings, but by that time it was really late at night and nobody was awake, so everything was still really dark and felt really empty and desolate. And then that's about the time I had the aid stop where Josh came along. Josh and Kristen and Cherie got back on after Brian helped out, and we sat around for a minute. And that point, that was about mile 70, I want to say. And that's when things started to get really rough. That's when my legs felt like they were going to stop working. It, I was in a lot of pain even when I just sat down. The tailgate was at that perfect height, and I just sat on the tailgate, and I felt like an old man. Everything was creaky and painful, and um, at that point, I'm still really far away from the finish line. So that thought starts to get in your head. If I'm in this much pain right now, if it's this hard to move, how am I going to make it, another 30 miles? How am I going to make it another 10 or 12 hours? That really starts to creep in your head at that time. And whenever I left that aid station, it was all I could do just to cross the road. I hopped down from the tailgate, and to get on the sidewalk, I had to cross the road, and I was lucky that there was um, no cars coming because I was walking like Ozzy Osbourne, just kind of hobbling across the road. Yeah, Um, Ebony said she bet my body felt like mush. It felt like mush. It felt like, I don't know. It felt like my legs were just carved out of oak at that time. It was so heavy and so not flexible. Everything hurt. Everything was stiff. And I don't know how I got to running. Well, I wasn't running. I was power walking at that point still. Um, I don't know how I actually got going. You just kind of fall forward and let your steps catch you and kind of start swinging your arms to give you some momentum. And luckily that way I started to actually creep forward and, you know, almost start walking like a human being. And that took me to that span from that point. I think it was mile 73 or 74 because it was a really long span to mile 80. And I think mile 80 is where I started to get into Ormond Beach. But in the few hours before daylight, it's been dark for a long time. It's been cold for a long time. And it's empty highway for a long time. And I also mentioned how badly everything hurt and how hard it was to move. So usually your mind leads your body. If you're in a good headspace and you've got a goal right in front of you, even if your legs don't work, you can trudge through it. But by that time, my body started to pull my head down and weigh it down. Instead of me telling my body what to do, my spirit was really broken, and my body started telling me that I'm not going to make it. Um, that all I wanted was that warm bed at the end of the race. I wanted some warm pizza or a burger or a warm blanket or something. And that's when things really started to spiral downward for me. Um, every My body and my mind were really, fighting against me. And there was probably my lowest point. There was a little cafe with outside seating, and they had, the benches for outside. So I sat down on one of them, and I put my face in my hands, and um, I know what it's like to have a history with some self-destructive tendencies, and you kind of get that feeling of, if I let something bad happen, then I'll have an excuse to give up. It won't be my fault if things go wrong. So, and it's taken me a long time to work through those kind of mental health issues and decisions. Um, but it started to creep up because I was at a really weak point. So I sat down on the bench and I put my face in my hands and I thought, if I just let myself fall asleep right here, um, and they have to come get me, nobody's going to blame me. It's not going to be my fault. Um, everybody's still going to be proud of me that I went this far, but I knew that if I did that, I was just cheating myself. And if I did that, I was just going to be self sabotaging. And I've worked really hard to get past that. Um, Endurance racing is one of the things that really helped me get past that point in my life. And not just that point in my life, because mental health is an ongoing thing, it's an ongoing process, it's an ongoing challenge. Um, and endurance racing is one of those things that helps me be stronger in those points. And so, I made up my mind that I'm not going to let myself fail on purpose. My legs can still move. There's still time left on the clock. So, right by then, everything else in the world, everything else in the race was just gone. There was nothing in my mind. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't focus on anything. It's like everything else disappeared, and there was just this one thought in my head that held me together, that there's time on the clock and my feet can move. So just focus on that, even though I didn't think I was going to finish that point. Um, I knew it through and through that I wasn't going to finish at that point, but I decided I was going to, get up off of that bench and just start putting one foot in front of the other and just see what happens, because I wasn't going to let myself down. I wasn't going to, I wasn't going to let that happen to me, because I've gone that far. I've been through so much in that race, and, you know, I started to think about all the things that I'd been through in my life the last few years, and the things that I've been able to work through. And, this is one of those things. And I'll just make a side trip here. One of the one of the things I love about endurance racing so much is how pure it is. There's so many parallels between endurance racing and life. Um, you go through struggles in both of them. You have a plan in both of them. Things always go wrong in both of them. You know, um, like Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, and life punches us all in the face. And that's what I like about endurance racing, because you get to these points where you don't think you can move on, and you find that one little thing to pull you through to the other side of that wall, instead of just giving up and staying on that side of the wall. It's just like in life, things go really bad, and sometimes we need help through it. Sometimes we need encouragement. I needed encouragement um, at that point, and I started thinking about how everybody in this little group that I started, um, how encouraging everybody else was. There's that many people watching me, um, and that gives me accountability. So, the same goes in life. You have people helping you through, and you have these little ideas that help you through, tough times, and you just find a way to get through it. That saying, "This too shall pass." Something goes wrong, you just find a way to keep going, and eventually it'll be past you. You'll work through it, and that's just how it is in endurance racing. Um, You get to those tough points, you get to those benches um, in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, where you don't think anything works anymore, and you know this is the end of the line, but something pops in your head, somebody gives you a little bit of encouragement, um, and you get that tiny little bit of confidence that you can at least put one foot in front of the other, and you can get through it. And when I got to the end of this race, I broke down in tears, um, and it wasn't just, yay, I finished, I'm happy. I started crying. It was thinking about all the things that I had to go through in the race. It was thinking about all the work that I put in to training. It was thinking about all the bad things and the struggles that I've been through in my life outside of racing the last few years, and sheer exhaustion. And I just thought about all those things, and somehow I've been able to make it through all those. I was able to make it through the race, and I crossed that finish line, and it's like this big weight lifted off my shoulders. Um, um, so yeah, that I feel like that there's a lot to learn from life that you can apply to racing, and there's a lot in racing that you can apply to life. And something happened whenever I crossed that finish line. Something happened when I made it through that point in the race. I feel like a changed person. I don't feel like the same person that I was before. I, Things don't bother me the way that they used to. Um, it's it was a life-changing experience, to say the least. And I'll get back to the main story now, but I really wanted to let you guys know that that's the one takeaway from this race that I wanted to share. It was the one thing that made the most to me. It meant the most to me, so that was the one thing I wanted to share. And I'll make a note at 24-ish minutes. I want everybody to go back and start looking at the video to get this point. Um, so I'll have to remember that. And I know I say a lot, so sorry. Just take a drink every time I say and I'll never make it through. Now that we got that little bit out of the way, putting my smile back on. After I got through that point, I finally made it to mile 80, and it was a mental change from then. I'm not saying that I was all happy-go-lucky and gung-ho and everything's great now, because everything still hurt. God, it hurt so bad. Everything hurt so bad the rest of the race, but it made a big difference whenever I got to that next point, because that was right at the beginning of Daytona. Or no, I don't know what exactly that is, between Daytona and Ormond, where 40 hits A1A, if you're familiar with that area. That's right when things really start to look like a town again, and the sun was starting to come up, and people were starting to stir around, and it started to get a little warmer. So I got this little boost of energy from that, and I felt really good. And I started thinking about, the cutoff point, and I looked at the ETA on my Garmin, and it said I was in danger. So it was holy crap, I need to get going. So I got all that going for me to give me a little bit of energy, and that lasted for a good little bit. Um, I got another little surprise visit from Dee Dee. She was driving from her hotel, I think, to Daytona to meet up with everybody. So she waved, said hi, and said she'd see me at the finish line. And I knew it was going to be hard, but I was in a good mental place, and I thought, I still can finish this race now. I made it through that really dark place, and there was the high at the beginning, the little dip, little little bump, then the nosedive. Well, now I was back up, not to where I was at the beginning of the race, but it was starting to get kind of fun again. Um, and then I made it through Daytona, and it really did start to hurt a lot more and a lot more by the end of the race. I've never had my feet hurt so bad. My quads hurt so bad. Right now, I don't know what's going on, but my right quad, I, I don't know if I damaged some nerve endings, but it's been numb ever since. Like I can't feel my right quad, but at least it doesn't hurt and it works. So I'm not gonna worry about it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Um, if it ain't broke, it just needs more engineering. Little engineering joke. So I got to the very last stop, and the last stop of the race is pretty cool. It's at the race director's house. The last aid stop is also the finish line, but we got to the house, and then you go another 3.5 miles, take a little loop, and then come back on the beach on the other side of the house. And on that little stretch, I got to see a SpaceX rocket launch, which was pretty cool. I've never been that close. Even though it was, you know, high noon, you could still see a tiny little rocket, and you could see the big flames shooting out of it, even though the sun was right there. So that was really cool. And luckily, it was in my line of sight. If I was running north at the time, I wouldn't have turned around to watch it because I couldn't physically do anything but just look like Optimus Prime and trudging along. And I was having a little bit of a hard time just because of how hard it was at that point. And out of nowhere comes Dee Dee to come walk with me. Um, I could tell she tried to gas me up a little bit to make the cutoff, which by then I wasn't going to make because I couldn't run at that point, and that's what I would have had to do. So I just told her, I'm not worried about the cutoff anymore. I'm just worried about finishing. Um, so we walked for a little bit longer to the end of that, to the bottom of that little loop, and then she took off for the finish line, and I went around to the beach, and that's really when I started to lose it. I tried to make a video and tell everyone just a little quick update that I was on the little home stretch, the last 3 miles, and I couldn't make it through the video without choking up because that's when everything really started to come into the picture. Like, I'm gonna finish this race. I made it through. This is really gonna happen. I didn't think it was gonna happen at that 75-mile mark. Um, and that's when things started welling up, and I'm lucky I had my sunglasses on because I was just tears streaming down at that point, and I made it through that little 1 minute video, and then as soon as I turned it off, I just you know started sobbing while I was running, and it was a long 3 miles because I could barely move, but um, like I said before, one foot after the other, you finally get to that little makeshift finish line. It was this big line of seaweed that washed ashore, um, and I crossed it, and Kristen and Cherie and Dee brought out that chair, and before they even brought out the chair, I just put my hands on my knees and I started bawling. Um, I haven't cried like that in a very long time. There was just so much that was going through my head, about the race, about life, um, having not just that confidence in myself, but actually knowing, seeing it happen, like I know I can do this now. Like I said before, it's a life-changing experience, and you can't you can't replicate that. You can't go somewhere and spend enough money to buy that feeling. You can't watch a movie and read a book, or you're watching me blather on and on over my bourbon about all this, and there's still no way you can really grasp or understand that or get that feeling. I could, talk all night trying to put it all into words, but I'll never be able to put into words how it felt. But it's just this overwhelming feeling of happiness and exhaustion, and just knowing you can do something that you didn't think you could do before. It's it's just an amazing feeling, and I know it's not practical for me to ask everybody, I want you to go sign up and do a 100-mile ultra marathon. That's not for everybody. But I want, if I can challenge everybody to do something, I want to challenge you to do something extremely difficult, something that you don't think you can do, um, something that you've always wanted to, that you've made excuses to not to do. Um, Whether do a 5K if you've never run, if you've never done a half marathon, do a half marathon, do a full marathon. Um, a full marathon is still a very long way to run. It's not just something you can hop out there and do on a whim. Um, I mean, some people can, but you really got to muscle through it. But I've mentioned his name before, Dean Karnazes. He's the guy that got me into wanting to do ultra running. He he always challenges everybody to run a marathon at least once in their life, just because you learn so much about yourself. It's it's like that perfect distance where it's something that you can train for. Anybody can do a marathon. Anybody can do a marathon. Um, Go to a marathon nearby. Go to an Ironman near you at some point. Watch one on Facebook, and just look at the different sizes and shapes and types of people doing it. And I guarantee you, there's going to be someone that looks just like you, someone that's in the same shape you are, or worse. Not really worse. I don't like using that um, when I'm talking about somebody's shape or size. Somebody that you feel is in less condition to do that than you think you are. Just look at that and you'll see that it's mental. It's not, there is a physical aspect to it, but running a marathon, you learn a lot about yourself. Um, just the way you process things, the way you work through things, the way you struggle. It's really important to know how to struggle in a productive way. It's important to know how to struggle physically, because it's a lot easier to understand struggling physically and knowing to put one foot in front of the other than it is to have to do it mentally. Um, but it's the same concept. I really think everybody should. I agree with Dean. Everybody should run a marathon once in their life, and feel what it feels like to get to that wall that everybody gets to, and to push through it, where the only thing that you have left is the people cheering you on around you, and knowing in your mind that you set out to do it, even even if you feel like your body's completely failed. I don't think any of us in our lifetimes ever get to a point where our bodies are completely in failure. Um, Not by this means. I'm not talking about like sickness or traumatic injury or something like that. I'm talking about just us going through something. Thanks, Ebony. I just came up with that right now. Know how to struggle in a productive way. Um, what was I saying? But I I don't think any of us in our lifetimes ever get to the point where we literally can't do something. We never get to that point where we physically can't push through. We don't have the mental strength to push through. I don't think any of us ever get to that point. I think we're all too comfortable in our daily lives, and we don't know how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And sometimes it takes that to really get through a struggle. And maybe that's another reason I like endurance racing so much is, I've always done things the hard way. I've always found the hard way to do something or put myself in a bad position to where I have to work through it. And some of you that know me personally, sometimes things happen, outside of things happen to me outside of my ability to do anything about it. And that just kind of seems to be my signature move is just knowing how to struggle through something, and I've gotten comfortable with it. And at that point in the race, that's like a high, and I want that again because that's the only place I've ever had all of that come together in one singularity, and I just love that feeling of getting through it. And I've like I said, I've already signed up for this race again. I've got bigger races in my sights, longer races, longer triathlons, longer than Ironman. There's just stuff that I really want to do, and it comes back to me, saying thank you to all of you for showing an interest in this crazy thing that I do. And I really appreciate being able to talk to everybody. And I've seen the number that there's people watching this entire time. And Ebony, I know you've been watching because you've been saying some stuff. But it's really humbling and it's really heartwarming that it's not just me that's interested in it. You guys kind of enjoy watching me do it. So I'm gonna make this a regular thing. This group isn't gonna be just for this race. I'm gonna keep it up and try and find better ways to bring up the communication. All right, got a question, Doug. How will you adapt your training for the next one now that you understand the mental and physical aspect of a 100-mile run? That's a good question, and it's something that I've been thinking about. Really good question, because there was something that I wanted to mention that I forgot about. What I've learned in running through the different lengths of runs is that every time you jump up from one distance to another, it's like the difficulty goes up. I'm having a brain fart, losing the word. It's more than just double the work to go double the distance. It goes up exponentially. Like a 5K, if you're really good at running 5Ks and you try to run that way to do a 10K, it's going to hurt. And I've made that progression. A lot of us have made that progression and seen that. And then when you go from a 10K to a half marathon, yeah, exactly. It's exponential. If you're good at running 10Ks and then you try running a half marathon the same way that you run those 10Ks, you're going to be hurt again. And it's the same thing with a half marathon to a marathon to a 50K, which is only a handful of miles longer, but it feels twice as hard. And then from a 50K to a 50 mile, that was a huge learning curve for me. Um, One, because I wasn't good at training at that point. I was just good at muscling through things because that's how I'd always done it, and I wasn't good at on course nutrition and hydration. So the 50 miler, you know, that was the that was the punch in the face whenever I had a plan for I'm just going to do these, these crazy distances. That was the Mike Tyson punch to the face. Um, but for the 100, I realized that I did put together a really good plan for 50 miles, and it worked awesome. And it didn't just stop at the 50 miles. Something happened along the way where I was having those lower GI tract issues. I don't know if it was, I don't know if I ate something bad. I looked up the symptoms, and it could be anything from, eating bad food and getting salmonella. I've had that before. It felt kind of the same. Or it could be just um, high stress running induced IBS. So I'm going to have to maybe play around with eating more natural foods. Maybe it was the gluten in my bread. Maybe it was the dairy and the pizza that I ate. I don't know. Maybe I'll just see if I can, filter out, gluten for a while from my diet. See if that, makes me less gassy on these 30-mile runs, or, really, really focus on cutting out dairy. Um, I I'm mostly vegetarian. I'm pescatarian, and as vegan as possible, as I like to say. I don't really follow one diet over the other. It's just kind of a method for eating well. I think that's the one big thing that I'm going to change. I need to figure out why, um, it just felt like I was just filled up like a balloon um, after that 50-mile mark, and it only happened when I ran. So maybe it was the running induced IBS. That was the first thing. That's the first thing that I'm going to have to work on. And the second thing is I had a really good good point, Olivia. Maybe it's because I was running for hours. Very good point. Cheers to that. The other big thing I'm going to work on is my pacing. I had a really good plan for those 50 miles, and if I didn't have those GI tract issues, maybe I could have run more, because I felt really good running 3/4 of a mile and then walking for a 1/4 of a mile, and I did that over and over and over, and I felt really good. My heart rate stayed really low. My body didn't feel like it was working. But maybe for this next time, instead of doing that the first half and power walking, cripple Ozzy Osbourne walking the second half, maybe I'll do like a slow jog for a mile and then a good power walk for a mile, just to kind of slow down the pace, because it's really hard to jog slow enough to keep the pace down. So maybe I'll just do um, like a slow jog for a mile and then walk for a mile, or slow jog for half a mile and walk half a mile. Do it more of that 1-to-1 instead of the 3-to-1 ratio of walking to jogging. And really, I think the only thing I can do mentally differently now is just knowing what's going to happen, um, preparing myself that once the sun goes down, even if I'm physically feeling good, once the sun goes down, that's when things are going to get tough. So I need to, just have that mental awareness of, knowing it's going to get hard, and sometimes just knowing when something's coming, when you can expect it, that makes it a lot easier to get through. Um, but really, I don't think there's anything more I can do mentally um, to have a different experience. Um, maybe I won't get that super low point next time. I won't be completely broken because maybe I can train well enough to where, I have a great time the whole time, and then I have to do, like a 200-mile race to get to that point. And, you build up a tolerance for running just like a tolerance for everything else. So maybe I'm on a downward spiral already for my addiction. Who knows? Um, but at least it's not something destructive. Um, it's a productive way of being destructive. I don't know. Yeah, that was a good question. But for now, I'm gonna I'm gonna keep up that program. Um, the program that I'm talking about, it's a book that I read called The Field Guide to Ultra Running. I don't remember the author because I'm not good with names. I'm sure he's very famous, and people might get mad at me for not knowing who he is. But he's got programs for 50K, 50 mile, and 100 mile, and I did the 100 mile. So I might keep doing maybe the 50K or the 50-mile program throughout the year until next December, because I still got to get Ironman ready. I've got a Ironman in Chattanooga in September that got postponed from last year. Kind of thankful for that because it let me focus on this race and get in really good shape. So I'm gonna have to do that, get back into biking and swimming, and I really need to get back to my strength training, because that's really important. It's not just running and cardio. You have to be able to build your muscles up and your joints up. Strength training is really good for not just your muscles, but your joints and your bones. So I need to get back to that, and that'll help me recover better after my workouts, and it'll also help me to recover better as I run. That's an important thing whenever you're running for 20 and 30 hours at a time. You've got to be able to recover enough to start running again and not completely break down. So that's really all I had on my mind. If anybody else had some questions, I'll answer some more questions, but I've been going for almost an hour right now, and if you know me personally, that's pretty crazy. I haven't talked all day. I saved up all my words for this, so I appreciate everybody listening, and looking forward to getting out there again. Oh, one last thing. Sunday after the race, I was in some pretty bad pain and I couldn't move. It was hard to just lay down and find a position that was comfortable. Um, but I slept for a few hours, came back home to Ocala, slept 12 hours, got up, had a little bit to eat, slept about 3 or 4 hours in my hammock. And, I did a good job of recovering because by Tuesday morning, I didn't feel any of the soreness or any of the stiffness. And I didn't want to hurt myself by going out again, so I forced myself to wait 24 hours. And Wednesday night, I took a nice little fun 8-mile run to go look at Christmas lights, and I'm ready to get back into it again. I've been taking the week off from work and just resting. So tomorrow I've got a trail run date with Dee Dee because she's going to start working on her first ultra marathon, and I'm going to get back into it. Ebony says, I've jogged and walked 2 half marathons. They suck, but one day I'd like to do another one. What tips can you give someone who is starting over from scratch? It's pretty much it. Start from scratch. Ebony, I know what you've been through. I won't, go into that in this public setting, but Ebony's been through a lot health-wise, and start with your walks. I started jogging as part of my rehab in 2009 with my left knee. I completely tore my ACL and had a new ACL put in. And that's really when I started jogging, because my knee, it felt like someone took a leather belt and tied it in between my bones and just yanked it real tight. You know, your ligaments are supposed to help your legs move, but it felt like there was a leather belt in my knee and nothing moved, nothing worked. And it took a lot of rehabilitation to be able to bend it. And that's when I started jogging. And, I started like speed walking a little bit, just a really slow jog through the neighborhood, like maybe a mile at a time. Um, and then it just kind of built up more and more. You just, work on your diet, make sure you're eating well. Ebony, I know you're eating really well. Um, Hydrating, and, just take it step by step. Don't, a good piece of advice I heard from one of my son's baseball coaches, they were down by like 8 or 9 runs in a game. And whenever they came into the dugout, he said, "You can't hit a 10-run homer. Just get, just get on base." So I always think about that whenever um, there's a lot to do when I'm getting overwhelmed. Like, you can't hit a 10-run homer. So just, go out tomorrow, go for a long walk, or, you know, jog and walk, log a mile, and then maybe the next week you can go a mile and a half, or maybe 2 miles, or it's kind of a personal thing, like what you're comfortable with um, building up to. But the only way you can do it is to do it. Um, can't just sit and talk about it. My cousin told me that he signed up for a marathon one time, and he asked what he should do. I said, "Start running." That's pretty much all you can do. Um, just do the damn thing. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I'll sign off for the night. I really enjoyed this, and like I said, maybe next time I'll find a time when everybody or a lot more people are available. I know there's a lot of Christmas parties going on tonight, um, but I'd really like to do like face to face, like a Zoom call or something. That's pretty cool. Um, and I really appreciate everybody's encouragement and just the interest you've taken in all this. I'm still overwhelmed by it. So I'm forever grateful and thankful for everybody. And thanks for watching. And I'll talk at you again.